are very Mohammed Awal Jibri, and I'm going to be your host for today's interview series. I would like to introduce our guest for today, Dr. Ismaila Cessay from the Gambia. Dr. Ismaila, good morning.
Good morning, Mohammed.
Dr. Ismaila Cessay, you are a very popular person in the Gambia. You have a strong voice, especially among the youth. But a lot of people might not know who you really are. So while you are telling us who you are, how do you think you can try to amplify your voice or try to make your audience well known by your fans?
Well, like you said, my name is Ismaila Cessay, born in the Gambia, raised up in the Gambia, did my schooling in Sierra Leone, actually. Traveled extensively in the African continent, but also in Europe. I'm an Africanist. I'm an Africanist scholar as well. And I greatly believe and very passionate about Africa. Studied in Europe, lived the almost half of my life in Europe, in Sweden, Scandinavia, and also in the UK. Did my undergraduate studies in Sweden, did my master's and my PhD in Edinburgh at Edinburgh University. Been working as a university lecturer at the University of the Gambia, teaching political science, heading the political science department as well, and also founding and also directing the C program in international relations and diplomacy. Like you said, yes, I live in the Gambia now because I was part of the diaspora, of course, at some point. One of those young people who were marginalized, who felt betrayed by the system, who grew up in poverty, and at that time, the only way that we thought we could make it is to travel to Europe. So we are part of those group of migrants, those cohort of migrants, young African migrants who went to Europe and started greener pastures. But after living in Europe for close to 20 years and after studying, I realized that the future is in Africa. That if my education cannot benefit my society, if it cannot benefit Africa, if it cannot benefit my country and my people, then it is worthless. It was when that I decided that I will go back home to Gambia and to kind of invest my knowledge in young people, because I believe they are the future. I see they have a lot of potential, and that if Africa is to move, it is moved by the young people, but they need to be equipped with the right weapon to make Africa move, and that weapon is knowledge. So when I went back home, I thought, why is the best place to invest this knowledge so it can have the dividend that is worthwhile? I said it's at the university. So I went to work at the university, shaping young minds, influencing them, inspiring them to giving them the knowledge they need for not only the transformation of the Gambia, but also the African continent.
Dr. Ismaila Cessay, you have shown tremendous courage and resilience in your drive for Africa's socio-economic development, especially in the Gambia. You've motivated a lot of young people from the classroom, through your lectures and of course through the way you've carried yourself over the years. What within you gives you that power? What has been your drive?
Well, my drive is to see Africa move. I've always believed in the potential of Africa. Not only believe, but also I think it's there, like Ambassador Keita has said. Africa has big potential. And for me, when I look back at the continent and look at the gains, the political gains, the economic gains, and the social transformations, I'm not satisfied. I think Africa can do better. What has been the problem actually is that the leadership we've had in Africa is not aligned with our potentials. Today, you would agree with me that when it comes to mineral resources, when it comes to the potential for transformation, Africa has huge potential, yet our people continue to live in poverty, starvation, conflict, you name it. And I think that should not happen And I always believe that it will take one generation of Africans to transform the fortunes of African for Africans. And I believe I'm part of that young generation of Africans, armed with the passion, armed with the drive, also armed with the patriotism and the knowledge to really transform the continent. So what I want to see in my generation is to change the situation of the average African, the situation of the young people, the situation of our widows, our senior citizens, our civil servants, those who work and toil for the continent, our women, our farmers. And this is my drive. And I think I've started that journey now. That is, I entered politics. For me, it's a journey. And I hope and believe that before I end this journey, my political journey, at least I would see some changes in the African continent.
Okay, thank you so much. Now let's continue with you, Dr. Ismaila Cessay. Do you feel African government are supportive enough for local entrepreneurs and African businesses?
No, they are not. But also we have to be mindful of the fact that when we say Africa, we are talking about a very huge continent. It's not a homogeneous entity. It's very heterogeneous with different polities. I mean, the situation in South Africa might as well be very different from the situation in Zimbabwe or in Gambia or Senegal. However, by and large, and for all intents and purposes, African governments have not really supported local homegrown businesses. We've seen how this fixation is with foreign investors. And for me, so far what I've seen is that I haven't seen any genuine investor coming to Africa. Even there are a few, but for the most part, these are people who just want to exploit the African continent, both its labor, its resources, and also its commodities, and also its mineral resources. And that's what I've seen, especially from where I come from. I've seen people clamor, leaders saying, well, we believe in the power of investors. Yes, we want investors to come, but we don't want exploitative investors. We want developmental investors, investors who will come and believe on a kind of a win-win situation, who will bring something, take something, but also develop something back in Africa. What we've seen is that is not the case. And I think for Africa to move, we have to believe in ourselves, in our potentials. For far too long since independence, we've outsourced our development to the outside world. We think that the only solution, that vaccine that is going to really solve our problem, there lies outside of Africa. But no, it lies within Africa, and we have to do some soul searching, look inwards, empower ourselves, empower our entrepreneurs, empower young Africans who are into business. And I think that has been the missing link. And I think until and unless we start supporting our own, start making things for ourselves, start producing the goods and services we need for ourselves. Today, Africa has grown up to almost over 1 billion people. That's a huge market. I mean, that's sub-Saharan Africa alone. That's a huge market. If only we could work together and integrate our economies and try to find a common ground, common policies. For example, I cannot imagine how today it's easier and the more trade volume happens between Africa and the South and other countries in Asia or Europe, than among ourselves. We trade less with ourselves, we engage less with ourselves. It's easier to travel, for me to travel from Banjul to London, 5.5 hours, very cheap, than for me to travel from Banjul to Lagos. It's gonna take me the whole day and very expensive, and that should not happen. And Lagos is just around the corner. So I think it's time for us to really come back inwards as Africans, as a continent, and see how we can harness our resources, how we can harness our young population, how we can work together, how we can build African institutions that is working towards lifting poverty for the African people. And I think Africa's resources should be used to make Africans live a dignified life. And for now, that is not the reason. And coming back to your question, no, we have not empowered enough our local businesses, because today most African governments would rather give contracts to foreign businesses than to our own local African businesses. And I think that is wrong. We have not also created the situation where African businesses can grow and expand within Africa. Instead, the environment is created for outsiders to come and grow. But the money they make is not reinvested back into the African economy. It is sent back to other places. That is why no wonder Africa is not growing economically. Mohammed.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smaila. Recently, you made up your mind to contest for the position of the president in the Gambia. Why do you want to be the president?
Can you repeat that question, please?
Recently, you made up your mind to contest for the position of the president in the Gambia. Why do you want to become the president?
Well, it's a very simple question. I want to be president because I believe I have what it takes. I have the solutions to most of the complex problem our country is facing today. And I've been on the sidelines critiquing governments, providing alternative solutions to them without making any headway. So I want to be president because I want to take part in the development of my country. I want to be part of that group of Gambians who is going to transform the country for the 21st century. And I believe I have the solutions as well. And I believe I have the temperament. I believe I have what it takes to move Gambia forward. And I believe I have what it takes also to ensure I come up with the strategies to ensure that our resources are harnessed and also reinvested in our people so they can live a dignified life.
Okay, thank you. So regarding this topic, this question, there's a lot of frustration in Africa, as you can see, due to unemployment. There's a huge growing unemployment in Africa that has actually contributed to the migration of young Africans to Europe or to other countries up north. What advice will you give to the youth on this if elected as a president? And what will you do differently of this?
Well, you are right. We've seen a lot of migration. We've seen a lot of Africans losing hope, a lot of hopelessness among young people in Africa. And today you have to understand that Africa's population consists mainly of young people. In fact, I think the average, the median age is below 25 years old. For Gambia, we are 17.5. So Africa has a very young population. But what has been missing is that we have not been able to provide opportunities for these young people to live a dignified life in the African continent. So therefore, we have a lot of push factors that really push our young people outside, and that we also did not create the environment so that even those professional Africans, the doctors, the engineers, the lawyers, for them to stay in the African continent. We see a lot of brain drain going on. But for me, even the brain drain thing also needs to be reconceptualized in the sense that we always talk about the professionals, those who are already equipped, but we also forget about those who are not, the young people who are going, the brains that we are supposed to make to put capacity to build, to make Africa. So it's a huge thing. I think what we need to do as Africans is to ensure that we provide opportunities for our young people to build their capacities, to invest more in education, especially higher education, in skills training, in the recreational industry, so that young Africans can be able to live in Africa and get the jobs that can help them to live a dignified life. Or perhaps maybe just for me, what has been missing is that we have not been able to create that environment where young Africans can really fulfill their true potentials. And that is a huge problem in Africa today. If you want to, so I think what we need to do is to come up with systems and a strategy to ensure that whatever you want to be in the continent, you can be it successfully. If you want to be a football player, the systems will be there to help you, prepare you to become a very good football player so you can make money from football. If you want to be a carpenter, to become a good carpenter. If you want to be a farmer, a good farmer. If you want to be an entrepreneur, a good entrepreneur. So those opportunities must be provided for young Africans by building the right institutions, educational institutions, by building the right skill centers, by ensuring we provide the right relevant education. And I think also that's an ongoing process, because today we're not thinking of the future. Tomorrow's skill sets, what the skills that we needed in the next 20 years are not the same skills that are needed now. It is now that we start preparing young Africans for tomorrow's job market. Because if we don't do that, we'll fast for 20 years, we will not be ready, we will not be prepared. Our young people will not be prepared to get jobs in the job market. And with the whole thing of globalization, whereby now jobs are competitive. If you a job posting in Nigeria, someone from South Africa will want to apply for that job. So it is time for us to really revisit our education system, revisit our curriculum, get the right relevant training for our young people, build their capacities, and then provide them with the opportunities so they can be able to live in their own countries. I think if we don't do that, it could lead to a kind of a disaster for Africa, because you have to understand, even the whole trend of migration is changing. It used to be easier to migrate before, but now it might be very difficult. And a recent research has shown us in the Gambia that even though international migration has decreased over the past 2-3 years, rural-urban migration has increased. What is that telling us? But the conditions that made young Gambians to migrate are still the same. The poverty, the frustration, the lack of opportunities. So the conditions are still the same, but the young Gambians are not going out anymore. Instead, they are moving from the rural areas to the urban areas. And with the COVID-19 destroying the tourism industry where many young people depend on, now we have a situation where we have a lot of young people in urban Gambia with no opportunities, highly connected to digital media, highly exposed, but no jobs and frustrated, and that could be a powder keg for disaster.
Thank you so much, Doctor. We're going to go on a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue with the rest of the question. Constraint in African business. If elected as the president in the Gambia, how will you tackle these challenges?
Well, obviously, like I said earlier on, investors obviously are needed, because investors bring the more needed finance when it comes to promoting business in any country. And I think we realize that government cannot do it alone. Government doesn't have that financial power to fund and also to take care of everything, especially in business. So the idea is to create the enabling environment for investors to come. But these investors also must come and cooperate and work with us based on our laws as well, with respect to environmental laws, and also for respect for our regulation. So obviously, we will encourage public-private partnerships. We will encourage foreign direct investment. We will encourage also a situation, builds institutions that can ensure that we harness our own resources as well. So what needs to be done is a kind of a multiple approach. But just to answer your question, foreign direct investment will be encouraged. We'll create an enabling environment for investors to come. But when they come to Africa to invest or to Gambia to invest, they must also do this within the framework of our laws, within the framework of our labor laws, our environmental laws, and also our regulations, so that it becomes a kind of a win-win situation and we don't feel like we are being exploited.
Thank you, Doctor. Talking about conducive environments, enabling environments, do you think the political situation or the political issue we have in some of the West African countries could actually be a constraint, could actually have some negative impacts on this topic?
Obviously, yes. Let's say it's of corruption. Corruption is endemic in most African countries today, and endemic corruption really, where it is endemic, serious investors want to go to those kind of countries, but also the fragility of our democratic systems, the weakness of our institutions as well, and also conflict in most parts of Africa. So obviously, and also lack of infrastructure, because if you want to electricity, for example, energy, which is key, and make sure you have very strong institutions, and also you have transparency and accountability. Those kind of institutions are needed, but also you make sure you have a strong state and not a fragile country, because when people go to invest, they invest their money and they would want to have returns to their money, and they wouldn't invest in countries where the future is bleak, and also countries that are very fragile. So these are the kind of environments to ensure that you give confidence to the investors, that investors have confidence to invest in a particular country. And there are certain things that must be met, certain criteria must be fulfilled for investors to come and invest. These are strong institutions, making sure that corruption is not endemic in that particular country, making sure that the country is not fragile, and to ensure that the right infrastructure is there, and to ensure that the right laws are there and the right regulations. I think these are what gives investors the confidence to come and invest in Africa.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. What is your vision for a good society? What measures would you take to make Africa more closely aligned to that vision? And you were talking about connecting African countries. Like, it's difficult for you to travel from the Gambia to Nigeria, and why it's cheaper and easier for you to travel from the Gambia to Europe or any country in Europe. How do you think you can kind of provide a solution to create that environment, a good society where every African is going to feel secured, safe, and proud of?
Well, I think that is not a very difficult thing to do. I think what is important is to ensure that we provide what they call human security for our people. And like I said earlier on in this interview, that Africa has huge potentials. Our resources are so much that, believe me, the Congo alone, the DRC alone, the resources in the DRC alone can feed the whole African continent. It can meet our energy needs and many of our needs that we need in the African continent. What we need to do now in Africa is, like I said, look inwards and make sure we build our own capacities, and we ensure that we harness our own resources to generate wealth. And when the wealth is generated, it must be equitably distributed among the African population. What we are seeing now is that we are not generating wealth. We are focusing more on eradicating poverty by taking on loans and debts and relying on grants everywhere. But it's not solving our problem. For almost 60 years of independence, we have not made any headway. So what we need to do is to come up with new innovative ideas of generating wealth using our resources. But also, the wealth generated must be equitably distributed among our people. How? Not by giving people handouts and money, no, by investing in people and ensuring that every African child has an equal opportunity, has a good start in life. How do you do that? By investing in education, obviously. Quality, relevant, universal education. By investing in quality healthcare. By investing in our people so that the young people who are born in Africa can go on to fulfill and develop their true potentials. And that is how you invest in people, by making people get the basics in life: access to clean electricity, access to water, access to the infrastructure, the roads needed for us to connect communities. But like, just to discuss on what you just said in terms of what's happening today in the African continent, that our societies are so disjointed. Integration has been a dream, obviously. We're still chasing the whole so-called African integration. Our societies are less integrated today than they were before, I would dare to say. And we need to work more. We need to reform, obviously, the institutions that are responsible for promoting this integration. The ECOWAS, obviously, the African Union, SADC, obviously, in Southern Africa, and other African multinational or multilateral institutions must be reformed to be able to face this task of African integration. Because what we are seeing now is that we have an Africa whereby the wealth is not equitably distributed. Some people are very rich, extremely rich, and the rest of Africans are dying in poverty. So I think we need to really work hard in ensuring that we promote regional integration at the sub-regional levels. For example, today, Senegal and Gambia, it's two countries. It's one country, two states. I mean, Senegal and Gambia share everything in common. We have the same, we speak the same local languages, we wear the same clothing, the same food. Everything is, the only difference is that they're a French colony and we're an English colony. So two states. And people say we live inside Senegal. We don't live inside Senegal. We live with Senegal side by side. And I think that's a perfect example of promoting African integration by making sure that we have common policies in agriculture, common policies in energy, common policies in many other issues. But today, traveling to Dakar from Banjul is a nightmare. I mean, you spend hours at the border post for showing documents that are unnecessary. So until and unless we start at that level, at that micro level, and later escalate this to the whole African continent, we'll be having a problem. So I think we need to promote regional integration and then we will escalate this to promote African integration.
Thank you, Doctor. Okay, I have one question regarding your election. If elected president of the Gambia, what will be your chief priority for your country, the Gambia, for the ECOWAS region, and Africa as a whole?
Well, for the Gambia, the priority is to make sure we provide the basics for our people to live a dignified life. Today, that is not the case. Today, many communities in the Gambia lack clean water, they lack electricity, they lack access to healthcare clinics, they lack access to good schools. So for me, the priority is that first is to reform the institutions. You have to understand that we've been living in a dictatorship for close to 22 years. Most institutions were weakened, at worst destroyed. So the task now is to strengthen existing institutions, but also build new institutions that are aligned or that can support our development goals. And what are our priority development goals is to provide the basics. First, electricity, water, access to education, access to healthcare, and also the right infrastructure. I think that is key for us now. Let me just repeat that again. Building the right institutions or strengthening existing ones that we think we're gonna need, because institutions help you in your development agenda. And there are institutions that are not needed anymore. We'll have to replace them with new ones that we think are in line with our development thinking, but also strengthen existing institutions that we think are very vital but are very weak. And also work towards ensuring that we fight corruption. And I think that is one of our priorities, because today the money we lose through corruption is huge. So we have to fight corruption to make sure that we get the necessary funds that will be diverted to social projects, education, healthcare, infrastructure, and so on and so forth. But for the African continent, West Africa, with the West African region, today one of our key problems is the lack of integration. The lack of we dealing with each other more. We view each other suspiciously. If a Gambian travels to Bissau, they look at us very suspiciously. If a Guinean comes to Gambia, it's the same thing. How can we ensure that we start to trust each other as West Africans, start working together as West Africans, and come up with the right frameworks that can ensure that our people can benefit from our resources? So one of our key goals, actually, for West Africa is to ensure we promote deeper integration in the African continent through infrastructural developments to make it easy for people to travel within West Africa, to also make it easy for young West Africans to travel within West Africa and learn and hone their skills by traveling for Gambians to travel to Bissau, be there for 6 months, learn Portuguese, come back, Senegalese to come to Gambia, those kind of exchanges, those kind of cultural exchanges for West African students as well. So the idea is to come up with so many new innovative ideas that can ensure that there is integration. For the whole African continent, obviously, it's not a hard shot, obviously. We know the problems of Africa today. The problem mostly has to do with security, both human security and also with state security. And I think we need to work within the framework of the African Union to strengthen the African Union institutions to ensure that the goals of the African Union are really achieved. I think that is what we can do as a state, to work within the multilateral frameworks, within the ECOWAS framework, within the African Union framework, and believing that the weaknesses that are inherent in these institutions, how can we work towards enhancing these weaknesses? How can we work towards ensuring that these institutions are fit for purpose? How can we come up with the new ideas to reform the African Union, perhaps itself, because we think that perhaps it is out of touch with the realities of the African people? How can we reform it? How can we inject new thinking, not only within ECOWAS, but also even in the African Union, to ensure that we Africans believe in ourselves and to ensure that we can come up also with certain policies, common policies to deal with emerging powers who are invading Africa today. Today, China has a policy for Africa with 54 states. China has only one policy, but we have different policies for China. Gambia's policy towards China is not the same as Senegal's policy towards China. How can we ensure that we come together as Africans to deal with most of these emerging powers who are invading Africa to look for resources? Otherwise, we'll be the losers at the end of the day.
Can you give us your final words and why you think you are the right man for the job in Gambia if you are elected as a president?
Well, my final words to the Gambian people is that we are living in unprecedented times and the future is at stake. The coming elections actually will be about development. In 65, our parents went to the polls to vote for independence. In 2016, we went to the polls to vote for democracy and the rule of law. In 2021, we are going to the polls to vote for development. Therefore, I think it's important for us to scrutinize the people who want to lead us into that era. It must be people who can give us the right master plan, the right blueprint that can convince us that they have what it takes, they have the right agenda in terms of development. Now, what makes me the right person for the job is because I can relate with most of the problems of Gambian society. I understand most of the problems that young Gambians are facing, and I think this is the time for Gambians to have a young leader who understands their problems, who can relate with society, who has lived the hardships of being a young Gambian, and also who has the passion and the empathy and the right vision to move the Gambia forward. And I think I have the passion for Gambia, I have the empathy, and also I have the vision. I have the right strategies. I understand the complex problems. And for far too long, I've always been a keen observer, trying to diagnose most of the problems of the Gambia and also finding solutions to them. And that I've been doing that for a very long time. My whole preoccupation has been that, always interrogating, understanding our problems and what are the root causes of those problems, and also finding solutions to those problems. And I think I've arrived at that era, at that time, where I think now I have those solutions. I understand the complex problem society. I have lived and tasted poverty, hardship, frustration, unemployment that many young people are facing. But also, I think I have the patriotism in me, because I love my country and I want to see my country move. And also, I believe that now is the time for us to come and apply most of the knowledge, both practical and theoretical, that we've learned over the years, trying to understand how other countries developed over time, the Singapores, the Rwandas, and come and apply it to the Gambia and make sure that we transform the country for today and also for the future.
That's a good one. Thank you, Doctor. Finally, before we go, I would like to know, Dr. Ismail Cessay, what do you do at your leisure time? What makes you happy? How do you try to relieve all the stress? It's about work, politics. How do you take out this stress and have a good time with yourself and your family, the loved ones? What are your favorite activities?